Listen up. There's no more excuses. We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat. Dr. Randy Ross is in the house. A raconteur, which we'll get to what that is in a moment. Keynote speaker, best-selling author, craftsman of culture and hope. And Randy, let's jump into it because as a published author, you've written some books on topics that we discuss a lot. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's good to be with you and Dustin, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Likewise. You have a really interesting name or title in your LinkedIn profile. You call it raconteur. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Oh, well, sure. It's first of all, I'm an author and a speaker, so I love to come up with good, strong words and wordsmith different ways of communicating. And raconteur just is someone who is very adept at storytelling. So a master storyteller. I love to take ideas and thoughts, sort of synthesize them, make them simple to understand and apply so that everybody can get access to them and then communicate them in a way that will profoundly impact their life for the good.
So how does one become a raconteur? How do you know you want to get into this? Like, when did you discover this incredible ability to tell stories and captivate
raconteur is just a great. So we all know that story is a powerful form of communication. And so as an author, as a speaker, that's what I like to do. I like to craft a story that's engaging, that's compelling, but it's filled with content that hopefully can help people both professionally and personally. And so whether I'm doing a keynote address, speaking for a corporation or an association or a nonprofit group, or whether I'm writing a book, I just want to make sure that the message that we're conveying is something that is upbeat, positive, and is helpful, going to leave a positive wake in the world.
So Randy, as you think about this, one of the things I've seen from people that are decent at storytelling, a lot of people from the outside are like, man, they're just great at storytelling. They just know how to tell a story. But then when you dig in, they tend to take an inordinate amount of time to prep and think and challenge themselves before really even start the story. So just, curious about, as you've continued to kind of develop your craft of storytelling, can you just speak to, the preparation and thought that tends to go into good storytelling? Because I think a lot of times people just think you're just kind of off the cuff.
Well, a good storyteller does come across as being extemporaneous, that it feels like it's off the cuff. But I can assure you that anybody who tells a good story has spent a lot of time, hours upon hours, crafting it and honing it to make sure that not only is it compelling content, but it's also contagious. In other words, it not only provides education or inspiration or challenges your paradigm. So from a cerebral standpoint, it's challenging, but more importantly, from a visceral standpoint, it touches the heart. Because if you convey information without engaging people emotionally, it's not going to stick. If you engage people emotionally without engaging them intellectually, it may feel good for a moment, but it won't last. And so I think it's very important to combine the two. And when you do, then all of a sudden you begin to help carve neural pathways where it's going to be memorable and that experience is going to be profound. And they're going to be able to walk away with principles and practices that they can immediately begin to apply. So I think there has to be a methodology to it, but there's also an art in storytelling as well. So it's not only the content, but it's conveying it in a way that's compelling.
So can you speak to that leading with the heart, following with logic sort of mentality, right? And I know it could also be flipped. What are some key ways to really create that emotion? Because, I feel like a lot of times they might be speaking with passion, but they don't really know how to convey that to, what are the things that really create emotion in someone else, to your point, so that they can become engaged in the story as opposed to, again, just very logical and benign.
Well, I think it starts with knowing your audience. You have to know who they are, what are their challenges, what are their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, what are they trying to accomplish. So the message itself has to resonate with your audience. That's the first thing. So you got to do your homework. You got to know who you're talking to and who you're trying to craft that message for. That's where it begins. But then you also have to have content that presses against the paradigm, that causes people to think about things differently, because you want there to be an aha moment. You want there to be a connectivity between their real life experience and their aspirations. Where can they take this? So you want to fuel their hopes and their dreams. And I think when you understand that, then you begin to craft a message in such a way that there's that commonality that you experience with the audience, but then you want to take them to a solution. And then once you've unwrapped that solution, you want to help them practically apply that and then bring it to close with a call to action. So it's not just, hey, I want you to think about something, but I want you to do something with this. If you buy into what we've talked about, if you understand what we've said, if you truly believe that it can make a difference, then this is how I want you to apply it. So I think principles without application fall flat. But you can't get people to apply things unless, first of all, they buy into the principle that it's going to impact their life in a positive way. So there is an art, there's a craft to storytelling. It's not just a matter of getting up and spouting out a lot of educational content, which we see happen all the time. You see keynote speakers all the time in an educational effort to try to get their audience to embrace or understand something. But once they've gone through their slide deck and people leave, they haven't even gotten to the break room or the restroom before they've forgotten everything that was said, right? And so I think part of it is, you'll appreciate this. Albert Einstein once said, he says, anybody can take something simple and make it complex through convolution and misdirection. But it takes a stroke of genius to take complex ideas, to synthesize them and organize them so that you can communicate them simply so that anybody can understand it and apply it to life. And he went on to say this, and I think this is very impactful. He said, the more complex the issues are, the more simple your questions should be. In other words, the greatest, most impactful things in life are actually the simplest things. There's a book that was written, it's been 2 decades ago, maybe even more. A book that was written by the title of, you may remember this, Everything I Needed to Know About Life I Learned in Kindergarten. I don't know if you remember that title, but it was a great book. And the author was so good and concise and just conveying the simple idea that the biggest, most profoundly impactful things in life are actually the simple things we learned when we were young, like share, don't push, say thank you, say I'm sorry, eat your vegetables, take naps regularly, all those things. If we would just do those things, life would be so much better for everybody. And it's a great lesson in leadership too, because I think oftentimes we make things far too complex. And when we make things complex, people get lost in the melee. And so I think as communicators, as leaders, if we want to become leaders worth following, then we have to speak with clarity and conviction, but it needs to be concise and it needs to be compelling.
So, Doctor,
the 4 C's, that's pretty impressive. That's a good nugget.
I have, for many years, and I think a lot of leaders have struggled with this, was thinking that more is more, when actuality, less is more. And as someone who comes from a marketing background, I've often, as I've learned this, because it took a long time to get this through my thick skull, was that a lot of times the most powerful messages in marketing are those that are short. The most powerful, impactful, memorable messages are the shortest messages. But why is it so hard for us? Because when I write anything, I think the more I put here, the more impressive it's going to be. When in actuality, the longer it is, usually the worse it is.
Well, here's the key. The more memorable it is, the more impactful it will be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as an author, I like to come up with words that compress ideas, a smash up, if you will. So I wrote a book several years ago called Relationomics. And by the title, we made up the word. Don't go try to look it up. You'll never find it. But we took the word relationships and economics and we smashed them together to make it concise. And you get the idea from the word itself. It talks about the power of healthy relationships to drive good business, right? What's the economic impact just beyond a fiscal transactional analysis? What's the impact that healthy relationships have on business? And we know intuitively, innately, it's profound. But we unpack in the book those principles that make it so impactful. And that's a great word, that communicates and conveys a lot of meaning. In the same way, I think leaders have to be careful because we live in a complex world. We do. I mean, they're coming off of the Cold War. The Army War College came up with an acronym to describe world conditions at that time. And the acronym was VUCA, VUCA. And today, if you research it, there's VUCA training. It's very popular in Europe. It's now beginning to come to the States. But VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity. And I don't know about you, but I think that adequately conveys exactly what we're experiencing in our workaday world now, because those same issues are present. But here's what I think. In order to combat the complexity and the ambiguity, we have to be clear, concise, and compelling. So as leaders, we have to make sure that we're on point when it comes to our messaging. There's too much ambiguity in the world. There's too much uncertainty. There's too much volatility. And a good leader knows how to clearly and concisely convey a message that will rally his troops. Now, I learned this a long time ago. My kids are grown. They're out of the roost. We're empty nesters. But I used to coach my kids in sports all the time. And when you coach a bunch of fourth graders in basketball, you learn very quickly that when you call a timeout and you bring them over to the bench, you can only tell them to do one thing at a time. One thing. You can't tell them, you can't give them 3 or 4 or 5 instructions because they'll get glassy-eyed within a matter of seconds. You send them out, you bring them over to the sideline, you kneel down, you get on their eye level, and you say this: pass the ball 3 times before you shoot. That's all I want you to do. Pass the ball 3 times. And hopefully by the 3rd time, you're hitting somebody that's open. But if you give them 4 or 5 or 6 different things to do on the court, they won't do any of them because they can't remember. They're confused. And we have a workforce, I think, that's confused because we send all kinds of mixed messages to them. I just got through doing some work with a company that's in the utility space, and their mantra is safety first, safety first, safety first, safety first. But when there's a power outage, we got to get it done. We got to get it done. We got to get it done. We got to get it fixed. So, okay, what is it? Are you saying that it's okay to miss a deadline or take longer to get the supply back in order in a safe way? Or are you saying, no, we want you to get it done now and short circuit safety protocols? You can't have it both ways. So which way is it? And we send mixed messages to the workforce all the time. We catch them between a rock and a hard place, and that's not fair.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things you brought up on the relationomics piece that I think is, obviously the relationships inside and outside of an organization can really drive success in a business. What are some ways that you've seen, because, having run multiple businesses, when you don't think it's about people, it's about people, right? And so what are some things that you've seen that have been successful when there are those relationships that, maybe are on the rocks or just aren't firing on all cylinders, and how to bring people together to see, each other's perspective and really just kind of bring them together in a fruitful way?
Well, we wrote a whole book on this, Dustin. I appreciate you asking, because that whole book, Relationomics, is about that. It's about how do you remove toxic behavior and how do you create relationally rich work environments. Now, we call that culture, but people will do good work when they're happy, and they're much happier when they do work with people they like to do work with. And it's not rocket science, but unfortunately, you think it's common sense, but it's not common practice, because there are all kinds of elements of toxic behavior in, just about every organization that I've had the privilege to work with. And the secret is to eliminate the toxic behavior and begin to build in some good practices where therefore they can create an environment that inspires people to bring their best to work every day. And the whole book unpacks things like how do you create open loops of continuous feedback? How do you provide good coaching conversations? How do you resolve conflict? How do you get into the growth spiral? How do you teach people to interact with one another in a generative sort of a way? And how do you create a relationally rich environment? Because we've seen over and over again, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, what vertical, what product or service you provide. It's so frequently the situation where someone may have been a great individual contributor, or they may have been a subject matter expert, and they brought a lot to the table as an individual. So the organization looks to him and goes, hey, why don't you lead people? And they give them no training, and they don't equip them, and they don't have the competencies to create a relationally rich environment. And the organization wonders why they flounder and why they fail. It's because they were never equipped adequately to lead in a way that people wanted to follow. And so that's where we play in the sandbox and spend the majority of our time, is helping organizations understand the power of culture and how much it's important to create a relationally rich environment in which people can thrive. Because if your people get up in the morning and they feel like they have to go to work, not because they want to go to work, you've got an issue. And so it's very, very important that we provide the kind of help to organizations that they can train up leaders worth following. Because both of you know, people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. They quit on culture. And culture is that frontline, cohesiveness of the team that the manager's primarily responsible for creating it. And most just quite frankly don't know how to do that.
So, Randy, we talk about culture a lot in the world, in the business place today. So often the term culture seems to be made up of a lot of different things. But after hearing you talk about a relational rich environment, I feel like this is the common denominator in culture. This is what culture is. Is it fair to distill it down to this one thing?
Well, yeah. What we say is that your culture is the collective expression of the values, the beliefs, and the behaviors that individuals bring to any endeavor. And it always is those three things. So it's the behavior. It's how do we play in the sandbox together? But behind the behavior is a belief system. And everybody brings their own belief system. That is it's the output of educational endeavors, personal experiences, their worldview. And then behind the belief system are values. What drives, what's foundational behind the belief system? And so I do a lot of work and coaching around the field of axiology. And I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar with that term. It may be like raconteur. Nobody knows what axiology is, but axiology is a strain of philosophy. And it's a powerful, powerful field of study. I geek out on this because it's so applicable to every business relationship. But axiology is the study of values, value constructs, and value creation. It has a lot to do with our capacity to judge and ascertain a situation properly. But at its very heart, axiology is an attempt to define and measure good. What's good? What's good in the world? And then be able to create movements of good. And when we talk about good, we talk about axiology. There are certain dimensions to that. There's the ethical part of axiology, which is what's good, what's right, what's morally just. There's the aesthetics part, what's beautiful and what works. And then there's the functionality part. How do we apply this to produce results? And so axiology is a fascinating field of study. And you'll see the theme of axiology run throughout most of my writing, because I believe that, number one, it's the best explanation of human motivational behavior, but also there are principles that if people will take them and apply them to the business setting, it will help them craft a remarkable culture. And so it's a fascinating field of study. And it's fun for me to be able to impart those principles to groups that have never heard of them before, but are profoundly impactful.
What's up, listeners? I just wanted to say thank you for being a part of the Hustle Nation community. We are absolutely thrilled and honored that you listen to our show. I wanted to take a break to share a special resource with you. I'm talking about our 2020 Vision Guide. This is a pivotal tool we use in our workshops where participants typically invest thousands of dollars for transformative experiences. Imagine having a crystal clear, actionable roadmap to not just meet but exceed your personal and professional goals. That's the power of the 2020 Vision Guide. And here's the best part. We're offering it to you for free. This is your chance to leverage a tool that has propelled hundreds of people achieve unparalleled success. Visit our website now. I'm including the URL in the show notes below, where you can download our guide and start your journey toward clarity and achievement. Don't wait. It's time to create the life you deserve today. Now back to the show.
And so, as you look at implementation, right? For those listening, that are running a business and saying, we're trying to take that next step in culture and build real relationships inside, our organization with people. Because to your point, it's a collection of all of those things, right? What is, if there was a starting point, right? Of just, where do you start, right? There's 20 steps to take, but what's the first step, right? That an organization could take to, understand maybe where they are and what's the next step they could take to make that even just a touch better.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is how do you people relate to one another, right? And then how productive are you? Are you creating the kind of results that you want to get? And we put it like this. Let's talk about culture first, then let's talk about some of the principles, okay? We define a remarkable culture, and remarkable is the name of our book, and it's also the name of our company. Remarkable means that you deliver a service or a product and you do it in such a way that you blow people away. You leave this indelible impression. You exceed expectations. You provide world-class service. You change someone's life for good to such a degree that when they leave your presence, they have this irrepressible desire to talk about you. And when they're talking about you, when they're remarking about you, then you indeed have become remarkable. But a remarkable culture has three characteristics. We call it the trilogy of a remarkable culture. And you can apply this at home. You can apply this in the business world. You can apply this anywhere you go. Wherever people gather, you're going to have a culture. And a remarkable culture is marked by these three things. Number one, people believe the best in one another. They want the best for one another. So therefore, they expect the best from one another. They believe the best in, they want the best for, they expect the best from. And that's a remarkable culture. So it talks about trust first, connection and compassion second, and accountability third. And in many organizations, we get that all messed up because we demand accountability first. But you can't have accountability without trust. If you do, you're going to create and incite rebellion. So you got to get it in that order. And the principles of axiology really apply to that and draw the best out. And so maybe we can talk for just a minute about, let me give you three principles real quick and simple. Okay. There are seven overarching principles of axiology, but we don't have time to break them all down. Let me just give you three. I'll give you three, what we call maxims, and I'll give you three questions that go with each maxim, or three ideas. And the first maxim is the maxim of creativity. And it just says we're all designed to create value in life. We talk about value creation, add value, bring value to every endeavor, but people don't know how to do that. So here's the question. Today, did you bring more to the table than you took away? Today, did you create more value than you took? Do you create more value than you take? It's pretty simple, but in a myopic, self-centered world that always says, what's in it for me, and is driven by promoting their own agenda, that's a pretty powerful question. Did you create more value than you took today? That's number one. The second one is the maxim of positivity, which just simply says, this is interesting. It says, all the good things you want in life are the byproduct of creating true value for other people. So, for instance, what do most people want? Happiness. What do most people think will bring them happiness? Money. But that's not true. Because if you made that much money, right? And you said, if I asked you how much would it take to make you happy, you said, well, if I had that much, I'd be happy. If I gave you that much, what would you want? More,
More.
more. It's elusive.
Yeah.
A wise man by the name of John Templeton, he once said this. He said, happiness pursued eludes, but happiness given returns. So I'm the happiest as a spouse when my spouse is happy. I'm the happiest as a parent when my kids are happy. I'm the happiest as a team leader when my teams are happy. So here's the question. Do you leave a positive wake in all that you do? Do you create more value than you take? Do you leave a positive wake in every encounter in life? Do you leave a positive wake? That's the maximum of positivity. And then the maximum of sustainability, where the rubber meets the road, is what problems do you solve? Because the way to continuously create value for others is to combine your passion and your strengths to solve problems. And there's a lot of talk in the world about pursue your passion. There's a lot about strengths finders and discover your strength and utilize your strength, but none of those are adequate in and of themselves. Those have to be combined for a purpose, and that purpose must always be to solve a problem. So what problem are you solving? The fastest way to create value, the best way to make a positive wake in the world, is to find the biggest problem you can find and solve it. Because the bigger the problem you solve, the more value you create. The more value you create, the more invaluable you become. And so those are three simple, quick questions. Now we could spend all day on each one of those and unpack each one of those. But if organizations would just grasp those three simple concepts and incorporate those questions into their conversation, I'm a big believer, Dustin, that people grow into the conversations that you create around them. And the best way to create a conversation is to ask questions. And so if we ask those questions regularly of ourselves and of team members, then we'll be well on our way to crafting a remarkable culture.
Say that again.
Yeah, it's
People
tremendous.
grow
I mean,
into
each one of those hits so hard.
Yeah. You said something there where
People grow into the
conversation.
conversations.
That's
Yeah,
incredible.
people grow into the conversations that we create around them. So people don't grow through lectures. They don't grow through events. And culture is an ongoing conversation. It's not something you can talk about once at an event and put on the shelf. It's got to happen daily. I simply say this, that leaders have to be champions for and keepers of the culture. And culture, the only way you keep it fresh is to talk about it all the time. And so the more you talk about it, the more people will grow into it.
Mm-hmm. And I love how even just the asking of the questions, because that's so critical, because that's what creates people to actually think about it and engage with it, right? Like you talked about earlier about, getting the emotional and the logical piece together. I just think is critical. I mean, you even talk about like the positive wake you leave in people.
Yeah.
And, one of the stories I shared a lot of times is really simple. I was in Arizona and I was going through a tour of downtown Tucson, and there was this teacher of 40 years that was giving the tour. She had retired and become this tour guide. And I asked her, I'm like, all right, 40 years as a school teacher, what's your nugget? Right. And she goes, oh, that's the easiest thing in the world. There's happy people and unhappy people. and this, it's amazing. Like when you hear it that way, I was like, man, that is so big. And to your point, it really ties into the, really, are you embarking positivity into other people or negativity? Because you see that in a culture so often that, and sometimes it's not even the person's intentionally doing it, right? They might even have good intentions, but they become that cancer of negativity to everyone around them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you may remember back in the day when Southwest Airlines first became very prominent player in the space, they hired happy people.
Yeah.
That was their criteria. Happy people, because they figured if you're happy, if you're going to create a positive aura and environment wherever you go, we can teach you how to do what you need to learn how to do. But they wanted to find people who basically were happy and hopeful. And I think there's power in that, just to say that alone. Because one thing I've learned is you can't make unhappy people happy.
Mm-hmm.
no matter what you do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I think it's a good hiring practice. Look for people who are competent and content, and hire them because they can always learn the competencies.
So, Randy,
Sure.
you wrote a book called Fireproof Happiness, and the tagline of that book is extinguishing anxiety and igniting hope. I think so often, even if you extrapolate the culture piece, there are people that come to work and they have overwhelm in their life, they have anxiety, other things that kind of loom around that topic. Can you speak to this fireproof happiness model you have? Because I find that so much we can do as leaders in terms of simplifying things can help to alleviate folks of some of that anxiety and nervousness that they may have.
Yeah. Well, and good cultures have a heavy emphasis upon employee health and well-being. Uh, they want to help their employees bring a better self to the table. And in the book, Fireproof Happiness, we talk about how do you build resilience into the workforce? How can you help people face and embrace challenging times? Because all of us have experienced that, right? Coming off of COVID. I mean, just think about all the things that have taken place in our world. There has been economic distress, there's been social unrest, there's been political partisanship. I mean, all of those things take a toll, not to mention coming off of COVID with all of the uncertainty and ambiguity and communication around that. And just, there's so many things in our world over which we have no control. And people sometimes begin to feel anxious and helpless. And so I wanted to write a book based on research that talked about the connectivity, the link between hope and happiness. And wanted to unpack that and just really look deep and find out what's the efficacy of hope and what can hope do for the workforce. And it was a great fun, project for me to work on in the heart of COVID, because it's a message that people needed to hear. And we're grateful that it's been very helpful and impactful for a lot of folks. But the idea is really quite simple. It's just this idea that we each have within ourselves the capacity to view things in such a way that we understand that no matter how difficult things may be, good can come from it. And so there are 4 basic beliefs that we unpack in the book. We call them buoyancy beliefs. When the storm surges, the waters begin to rise, when conditions begin to flood, how do you keep your head above water? In the buoyancy beliefs, there are 4 of them. And I'll just give them to you real quickly, and we can talk about them if you like. But the first is positivity. You have to believe that your tomorrow can be better than today, no matter how bleak today may be. That's number 1. You just have to have this forward-looking idea that you're going to be able to persevere and come out on the other side better. That's the first thing. But that's not enough. That's foundational, but it's not adequate, because positivity alone will not get you through the most distressing times of life. The second belief is responsibility, which simply says, I'm not a victim. The world is not acting upon me. I am the star in this drama. I can write the next chapter. I'm not a victim. I have a say in how my life unfolds. No matter how dark, no matter how bleak, no matter how challenging, I'm going to take control. I may not be able to control anything in my environment, but I can control me and my response to it. So that's the idea of responsibility. The third is agility, meaning that there's not one single way to get to any desired destination. But if one path is blocked, you can either figure out how to remove the obstacle or circumvent it or collaborate to get over it. And sometimes if that's not the most viable path, you can always choose another or alternative route. You can choose another way to get there. And then if all fails, you can always re-goal. You might have to change your desired destination because the one you were trying to go for no longer logically makes sense to continue to pursue that. So this idea of agility has with it this connotation of creativity. And, I love this definition. Creativity is what you get when all your other options are taken off the table. And sometimes difficult times take options off the table. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because we have to be forced to think through, okay, well, now that resource is gone, now that path is not possible, Now that that's been diminished, now how do I do it? And that's where some of the best ideas are born. That's where innovation is birthed. So that concept of agility is absolutely instrumental. But here's the kicker. The last one is embracing your reality. You have to embrace the totality of reality. Because a lot of people think that hope is like wishful thinking, or pitching pennies in a pond, and it's not at all. We define hope as a dynamic motivational system tied to inspirational goal setting. Hope always has a plan. Hope always has a desired destination. Hope always dreams of a brighter tomorrow. And so what is that? But you have to embrace your reality. You can't stick your head in the sand and wait for the storm to pass. You have to embrace the totality of your reality, no matter how harsh it may be. But in doing that, what it does is it prepares you and gives you the emotional fortitude to pursue what otherwise would be a challenging path. But all of those 4 principles put you well on the way to being able to establish a direction that's going to be not only positive, but profitable as well.
That's interesting. I've said for a long time that happiness is a choice, and that we are in control. For the most part, we're in control of what we do, and the way we think, the way we talk, the way we act, our body language, which also I think ties into this quite a bit. Is it as simple as just saying it starts with happiness? It starts with controlling your thoughts. And you said it before. Number 2, responsibility is control. If you can start to control your thoughts and dictate even the self-talk, I feel like that's a game changer for a lot of people, because that almost cascades into, we talk about the CTFAR model. And if you start with that, everything else starts to kind of cascade into one another and culminate into more positivity in life.
Yeah. Well, so let me give you an example. I talk a lot in the book about an individual by the name of Viktor Frankl. And I don't know how many of your audience may have read, but Frankl was an Austrian neuroscientist. He was Jewish. He was taken prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. All of his worldly possessions were taken away. All of his family members were killed in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. He survived 4 concentration camps and came out on the other side and wrote, in my estimation, one of the most incredible masterpieces on the resilience of the human spirit. And the title of the book is called Man's Search for Meaning. Phenomenal book. And what he says in the book, he said, everything can be taken away from you. Your possessions, your relationships, everything, even your sustenance, even your food. Everything can be taken away from you except for one thing that no one can ever touch. And that's the power of your personal choice. You get to choose your attitude. You get to choose how you will respond. No one can force you to respond in a way that's not consistent with your values and the spirit that you possess. You can love in the face of hatred. You can bring positivity in the face of negativity. You can bring life where there's death. You can bring hope where there's darkness. That's up to you. That's your choice. No one can take that away. And I lean into Viktor Frankl when I think I'm going through a bad time. I compare my life to his, and it pales in comparison. The things that I complain about or I get down about, not a fraction of what he had to endure. But he always had this perspective. In the end, he would persevere. In the end, he would come out on the other side. But his question was, when I come out on the other side, how will I have grown? And how will I be able to help other people learn the lessons that I've learned through this experience? And I think there's a powerful idea in that sometimes when we get anxious, we get depressed, we get down, we get downtrodden because maybe things haven't worked out for us, or we haven't achieved a goal, or we get disillusioned. What Frankl would say is, take the focus off yourself. This isn't about you. It's about how can you pour into other people. And we know from research, one of the fastest ways to help people get out of, it being in a rut or depressed is to focus on expressing gratitude to other people. Focus on what other people have done to contribute to your life and to your success. Focus on giving back to others. Focus on generosity. Focus on doing good for others. And that'll immediately snap you out of whatever myopic depression that you're in. And that's what Frankl said. He said, I saw myself on the other side of this atrocity, surviving, number one, because he had the resilience where other people gave up. But then because of that, the contribution I would be able to make to society and to the lives of others. And that's what sustained me during the darkest hours. And I think there's power in that. I think there's a lesson in that sometimes we get too self-absorbed in our, thoughts and our concerns. And it is a matter of, changing our paradigm, getting a new mindset, renewing our mind. That's all part of the process.
Well, and even what I think is interesting about what you're saying is it's about leading with pouring into others, right? It kind of keeps coming back to that same theme of we're all so focused on, what's coming to us and our own mindset, right? Versus, go fill others' buckets, go impart onto other people, be that, as you said, that positive wave or that wave of positivity, right? Like, that type of thing. It's amazing on how it truly is contagious. I talk a lot about, we refer to some of these things like as the hustle culture, right? Where it can be contagious, but so can apathy and negativity, right? And it's really about how do you choose which path, because it's really easy for either one of them to be contagious, and probably apathy and negativity is probably even more contagious, candidly. And so it's, what are you doing proactively in yourself and for others to get that wave to start and continue to go?
Absolutely. And that's really what axiology is about. It's about creating movements of good. And how do you do that? How do you create movements of good in organizational life? The father of modern axiology, Dr. Robert Hartman, was a fascinating individual because he too endured the hardships of Nazi Germany. He was able to escape. The SS troops were hot on his heels, but he was able to escape. And so he saw what an evil person with an evil intent could do to create a movement of evil, that being in Hitler. But when he fled Nazi Germany, he came face to face with and became good friends with Walt Disney, of all things. And so he became Walt Disney's personal coach and confidant, and he became the first CHRO, if you want to call it that, of the Disney organization. And he served the Disney organization for 8 years. And that's where he applied a lot of these principles that he taught in the field of axiology. But think about this: Hitler on one side, right? Walt Disney on the other side. And what he said was, if an evil man with evil intent can create a movement of good, can good men with good intent create movements of good? And so axiology is all about creating movements of good. And what does that look like, and how do you do that? And that's the message we get to take into corporate America and help them begin to create movements of good of their own.
Love it. One of the things in there you mentioned was the gentleman, Victor. He saw something, what he wanted in life. And Dustin and I talk about this with the hustle culture, is that a lot of folks who are successful don't have a vision. And there are a lot of folks mostly who are unsuccessful, are falling short. Maybe they're stuck in the hamster wheel, who don't have a vision of what they want or where they want to go. Where does that fall into all this framework? Because as we tend to look at success and do more and more training, I find that can very much be the catalyst of, or the bottleneck in many cases.
Yeah, and that's a great question, Chris, and it's a good place to jump off into this conversation, because in Fireproof Happiness, we define hope as a dynamic motivational system tied to inspirational goal setting. So it all has to start with having this visionary, compelling goal for which you're trying to strive or attain. But here's what I often challenge people to consider. All too often, our goal setting is mostly metrics driven. And that's a problem, because it needs to be values driven. If it's not consistent with your values, if it's not values based, if you're not developing your character in the process, then the metrics don't matter, because metrics don't create value. Value creates metrics. Let me give you a really quick illustration of that if I can. Every New Year, after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, we've all eaten too much. What's one of the most prolific New Year's resolutions? That's a goal. So what's the goal? We say it.
Lose weight.
To lose 10
Lose
pounds.
weight. Yep.
You're going to lose weight. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. All right, that's your metric. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. So what do you have to do to lose 10 pounds? Well, you got to eat right. You got to watch your calories. You got to burn, you got to work out in the gym, or you got to walk out, burn more calories than you take in. You got to eat well. You got to, get off the couch and get to the gym. All those things are good. Nothing wrong with that. But here's the problem. After 2 weeks of being really good, we go to the buffet on Friday night, right? Our local restaurant. And we think, what do we say? I've been so good for the last 2 weeks. I'm going to what? I'm going to reward myself tonight. And it's metrics driven, because that's not values based. Or we're on the routine, and after 3 months, we lose 10 pounds, and we go out and we celebrate with pizza and beer, and we shoot ourselves in the foot, because that's metrics driven. What if instead of saying, I want to lose 10 pounds, what if I said, this year, I'm making a commitment to be healthy. I don't care about the numbers. I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to do the right thing for my body. I'm going to do the right thing for me. I'm going to make choices that a healthy person would make. It's values based. It's character based. Is there a goal? Of course there's a goal, but I don't care how long it takes me to get there. It may be 5 months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, but it's not the metric that's driving the performance. It's the commitment to the value of being healthy. So when I go to the buffet, I act like a healthy person. I make a healthy choice. I don't go back for a third time. I don't hang around the dessert tray. When I, reach a certain milestone, I don't blow it all off, because now I have a commitment to act in a healthy way, because I'm making a choice to be healthy. It's not about what you do. It's about who you're becoming in the process. And I think so many organizations miss that, because we want to be the biggest and the best. And I hate to break the news to you, but nobody really cares. Your employees don't care that you're the biggest and the best. Your teams don't care. Your clients don't care. The only people who care about that are your investors, your shareholders. They're the only ones that care. Nobody else cares. And if they don't care, why are they going to get there? But I'll give you another way to approach it. I work with an organization that some of your team members or some of your listeners may be familiar with, a group called Chick-fil-A. You ever heard of Chick-fil-A?
A little bit.
Right, we worked a lot with Chick-fil-A. You may be surprised to hear Chick-fil-A's mission statement. Most people don't know it. But Chick-fil-A's mission statement is to be the world's most caring company. And what does it have to do with chicken sales?
Right.
Nothing. It's character based. We want to love on people. We want to embrace people. We want to include people. We want to take care of people. That's our value construct. And so all their business model and all their behavior is based upon that belief and that value construct. We're going to be the world's most caring company. Here's the fascinating part. At the end of 2022, when all the numbers came in, they sold more as an organization than their top 5 competitors combined. And they did it. This is with 1/3 the number of retail outlets. And they're closed on Sunday, because that's part of their value base. So they sold more than Kentucky Fried Chicken, Zaxby's, Wingstop, their 5 top competitors combined.
Yeah.
Because they understood that their goal was not to be the biggest and the best. Nobody cares. But if we care for people, it'll make a difference. And so I think sometimes we have to reorient how we choose to pursue things.
Dr. Randy, last question. That was going to be my last one, but this one has to be. So if you lead a sales team, how do you implement this and take people away? Like, some of the best performing sales organizations are very metric driven. How do you change that to be value driven?
Oh, it's hard. It's really hard to change that. It's hard to change it in a publicly held company where everything is driven by quarterly fiduciary responsibility. Because what happens oftentimes is we exchange short-term gains for long-term results. Because we want to prove the short-term gain, we give up what could be a long-term result. But sometimes if we pursue the long-term result, it means we have to take a hit. We might have to sacrifice in the short term in order to get there. Because we got to take care of our people first. We got to make a difference first. And I think that's one of the things that the many organizations, get out of whack. They've got to be concerned not about their shareholders, but their stakeholders. Well, who are your stakeholders? Well, your clients, number one, but your clients are going to be treated like your employees are treated. And so the first thing, you got to take good care of your employees so that your employees will take care of your clients. And yes, your shareholders are a part of that, but they're only a part of it. They're not the driving part of it. And so I think that's one of the things we have to reorient ourselves to think about holistically. And so that's a big part of it. But ask me the question again, because I think I missed the first part of it. I think I jumped to the second part of it.
Yeah, it's ultimately how do you create a value-driven sales culture? Because so much of high-performing sales teams are almost exclusively metric-driven.
Yeah, and so here's what I would say. You have to get back to this simple idea. Do you create more value than you take? Hitting numbers is all about what can we get? What can we close? What are the numbers? But what we have to be asking is, how much more value can we bring to our clients in consultation, in providing resources, in helping them grow to build a better business? How can we partner together with them so that we both experience good growth? And that's not something that may pay off in the short run. It's something that may be a little bit longer, but I guarantee you that will always come back in the end greater if you do it correctly. So I think for a sales force that's driven by metrics, we have to go back to this whole idea that metrics don't drive value. Value drives the metrics. And so we have to give more. And one of the things, sometimes people say this in sales training strategy, you have to give to get. No, you give to give. If you give to get, people understand that you're just playing a game. You have to give without any expectation of reciprocity. You have to build a deep, rich relationship of trust so that when the opportunity does come to put our product or our process, whatever it is, our service that we provide in front of that client, we've already gained the trust because it wasn't about pushing a sale. It was about creating a relationship. And that's challenging to do in some environments, because some environments it's produce or you're out. And that's a real short-sighted way to think about the sales process. But it's one that, a lot of sales organizations fall into that trap, and it's to their own demise, unfortunately.
That's a phenomenal way to wrap up this conversation. I thought that was extremely insightful because, especially an entrepreneur, we're so focused on the metrics, and sometimes the metrics only, that I think we lose track of the value. But before we let you go, Randy, tell us a little bit more about where our listeners can find you and what you have going on.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris. You can find me at drrandyross.com. Just DR, no period, drrandyross.com. Same on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever social media platform you prefer. And I travel the country and provide keynotes for organizations. We do developmental workshops that range from half day to day and a half sessions on all of our content. And we have a robust digital platform. If people are interested and they've got a geographically dispersed team and they want something that's scalable and affordable, we've got a lot of great training and developmental content there as well. But all my books you can find wherever fine books are sold, or you can go to our website and see a list of those as well. So I would welcome being able to connect with any of your listeners.
Yeah, folks, there you go. Check them out. Great website, great books on Amazon. Randy, thank you for being here. That was an insightful conversation and certainly a lot of fun. We're going to have you back because I've got a list of questions I couldn't get to. So thank you for being here.
Okay, well, we'll do it again sometime, but it was a pleasure to be with you, and I'm honored that you would give me your time.
Likewise, we appreciate it. For all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in again. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor, go to Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen and download. Leave us a review. It only takes a minute, but it can help us out greatly. Thanks so much. See you next time. Peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.